Hello. Okay, so when you move to a new country, all is foreign, and your senses are on overload with new noises, like a constant chatter of the language you don't know. And there are new smells and new sights, and even your sense of touch is stimulated, like being rubbed against or bumped into, something that we are not strangers to living in Shanghai. And when I first landed in Shanghai with my husband Adam, we were the only expats at our school. I mean, the only ones. Our building was completely empty. Nobody that I worked with was there. I was hired into a director position, and as an administrator, you arrive a lot earlier than the teachers do. But as new admin, you arrive a week before even the existing admin and new hires do. So Adam and I were there for a week with only each other to talk to, and so much to absorb and set up. So when I became aware that my first neighbor, also a new hire, was coming, I was counting down the minutes to knock on her door. Like that day when we were walking around our new neighborhood, a man walked out to the sidewalk and out of nowhere just snapped a chicken's neck right in front of us. So I was like, I think what I wanted to convey to her was, hey, this shit's crazy. I'm overwhelmed too. Let's be buddies so we can do this together. And I have no idea what I said to her, but I'm so grateful I didn't scare her away and that she became my rock while I was living in Shanghai. Um, so this new neighbor of mine was Meghan Hinds, and she's my guest for today. Meghan is a 32-year-old passionate and energetic individual who enjoys being active either outdoors or at the gym, writing in her bullet journal, and traveling the world. She's been a teacher for 9 years, 6 of those years being overseas while teaching in Shanghai. And she really enjoys to create inviting space. She really enjoys to create inviting spaces either in the classroom or in someone's home, and interior decorating is a favorite hobby. Meghan, welcome.
Hi. Yeah.
I think anybody who knows us knows that we've been like connected at the hip the couple of years that we were together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thick as thieves.
That is so funny because I actually wrote that in my little bio, but I was like, that doesn't even sound like me. I never say it's thick as thieves, so I delete, and then that's exactly what we were. So, anyway, you've spent 4 more years in Shanghai without me, so it's like probably a whole different experience that I only love to hear about. So you've been living in Shanghai for a total of 6 years now. Let's kind of start off by talking about like what you were doing before you moved and what influenced you to live abroad.
Sure. So I'm originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I was teaching early childhood special education, getting very burnt out because that is a very challenging job.
Mm.
But I guess before I even started that, after my final year of university, there was an opportunity to student teach in Ireland for a little bit. And I jumped on it. And I just fell in love with the idea of like being in a different country and, being outside my comfort zone and meeting new people. And one of my professors noticed that. And she's like, have you ever thought about teaching internationally? And I was like, no, what's that? And I looked it up and I thought you were required to have your master's. So I immediately started that program right after I graduated with my undergrad. And then I applied for a job. Am I moving too fast? Is this making sense?
Yeah, it's making perfect sense. Do you regret getting your master's at all? Like, I mean, you didn't have to. That was a lot of extra time and effort and money and schooling.
It was like a lot, but I'm so happy I have it. I literally turned my thesis in, and 4 days later, I got on a plane to Shanghai. But our head of school at the time was actually from Minnesota as well, and he noticed my my resume, and he's like, "Hey, I see you're from Minnesota. I know you're a good teacher. Would you like to move to Shanghai?" And I was like, "No." I wanted to like wait for other offers because he was one of the first. I think I told him no like 2 more times. And then finally somebody heard like what school it was in what city, and they were like, "You're an idiot. Say yes and go." And so I decided to move to Shanghai.
Oh my gosh.
2014.
So, so at that point, I mean, what were you waiting for? What did you think you were going to get at that point? What kind of position, or where did you think?
They told me I was going to be a nursery teacher, and I was like, "Oh God." But then, like, to make it easier, he was like, "I think actually it could be a blend of nursery preschool," and that seemed a little bit more up my alley.
Mm-hmm.
All I knew was that I wanted to get out of Minnesota and travel and like just try something so new. And
and that was it for you. But what did you think that you were gonna like go back to Ireland, or were you thinking Europe was in your future? Like, where did you envision yourself going before Dan convinced you to come to SCIS?
so I was told to be very open-minded. And so I knew that. However, the one thing I was like, the one place I'm not going is China. I will go anywhere. I'm not going to China. And I just wasn't getting offers. So then I was starting to be like, okay, yeah, because I was kind of thinking Europe. But then when I talked to a friend, she's like, you can't go straight to Europe. You're going to make hardly any money. You have no experience. They're not going to hire you. So she's like, try out Asia. And then like, I think I heard from a school in Thailand. I was looking at Myanmar. Thank God. Because like when you're going abroad for the first time, you really have no idea what you're getting into. You think you're open to anything. Oh my gosh, Jess, we're so lucky that we came here to Shanghai. It was so like difficult. There are times, but like for the most part, it's such a great first place. And most of our friends that we worked with were shocked that it was our first time abroad and this is where we landed.
So yeah. So would you say that, I mean, I felt like for me, when most Americans first learned that I lived in China, they would kind of give me like a pity face, like, "Oh, sorry." And I think we both feel like it's just an awesome place to be. What makes it so amazing? Like, what's so great about it?
So what's so funny is when I was reading your questions, I definitely remember everybody's initial reaction. Are you sure? Really? And I didn't really know what to expect, but like being here, I think the best part is how international it is. When I think about my friend group, like whether we're going out to dinner somewhere, we're going to a friend's apartment, I'm surrounded by so many different nationalities, and I would never have that opportunity in the States. It's like the world market, right? In somebody's place. It's like Italy, Serbia, Australia, Switzerland, Sweden, just to name a few. So I just international it is. With that said, the food, any food you want, you can get it.
I know. I look at your Instagram posts, and half of it is all the people, you out having fun, looking glamorous and being fit and looking so, like you are out living your best life. And then the other half are all the dishes of food that you eat. And they look, I mean, they're not like you go above and beyond. So tell us about like the cuisine, like what is life out in Shanghai like in terms of like the food?
So, I mean, just as international as the people, the cuisine is just as international. It depends if you want to eat, Japanese food, you can go for sushi. There's French food is very popular here. I can think of so many French places. Italian barbecue places, but then you have like really good Chinese food places. And since China's so big and there's so many different regions, you have such a variety of different types of Chinese food too, which is great.
Mm-hmm. And, I remember when we go out to eat, you could go kind of low scale just down the street. Like we used to go just down a block from where we used to live and go get some fried rice or dumplings or jumbing, which is like the breakfast burrito. And that was all a few bucks, if that. So some of them were worth cents. Yeah. And some of them were just like $1, $2, no more than $5 sort of thing. Do you still do that at all?
Sometimes. I think one of my favorite things are when we can get a big group of people and go to a Chinese restaurant and they have the big lazy Susan in the middle and you just order almost everything on the menu. And it's just like you're trying to eat and spin the lazy Susan and, drinking beer out of like little cups.
Yeah. Why are they so small? They're like orange juice glasses.
I think because the bottles are so big. So it's the idea of sharing, like, I don't know, or maybe it's making you be mindful of how much you're drinking.
I don't know. And so what would be like kind of a sampling of what would be on your lazy Susan?
Definitely the green beans that have the Sichuan peppers on them. For sure, some kind of spicy noodles. I love noodles so much. Lotus
root.
Yeah, mushrooms. Some places have like ribs or, different kind of like, God, I don't know. I should really have.
No, but I think some of it's just like you just order whatever's on the menu and you just kind of sample whatever is there. But, it's a nice variety. Eggplant. I remember eggplant was a big one too.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest difference when you do, local cuisine here is in America, it's not very common to share food. You typically order and it's yours. And here, you're always sharing. So it really gives you the opportunity to try new things. And if you don't like it, somebody else at the table probably does. So it's just more like, I don't know, company or like together kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that too. So that must have been, and I remember people were like, and I ended up doing it too. I'm so guilty of this. I would like dip my chopsticks in after eating. Did you you do that? Okay. I think at first I was like, oh my gosh, I have to use these. I only have one set of chopsticks. I'm like, what's the serving chopsticks? And then I was just like, oh, we're just like one big family. It doesn't matter. We just like pick out, whatever food we want and it's fine. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes they'll put like, you have like typically like a soup spoon or like some kind of rice spoon and like someone will just put theirs in there and keep it in there. Some of the fancier places have 2 sets of chopsticks per person. So the one is for grabbing food and the other is for eating. But my God, once you are like in the moment, I can't even tell you, when someone didn't use their chopstick by the look on their face. Like, like, oh. And
it's okay. So that kind of makes me think of, well, I guess let's continue on food some more because I'm loving this reminiscing of all the cuisines and the type of foods. You touched upon that you could like eat so cheap and, very locally Chinese, but then you can eat very fancy for a lot of money. And like, describe what that experience would be like too in Shanghai.
So one of your questions was if I was going to take your cousin out in Shanghai, like where would you go?
Mm-hmm.
And I've recently like fallen in love. I've always loved brunch, but like being here, it's like on a whole new level. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm slightly like the brunch queen. I have this note on my phone of all of my favorite brunch places and if they have free flow and how long their free flow is. And so most of the places are like 25 US dollars for free flow for like 3 hours, which is incredible.
Unheard of. Mm-hmm.
The food is a little different. Like, yes, you can do super fancy, where you might be spending like 80 US dollars to 100 US dollars on just food.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, I have some friends, and there are times that I need to practice this too, where we call it budget brunch. You go to a certain place and it's like cheap bar food, yet they're still having free flow. And I guess it would be like maybe $20 for
Mm-hmm.
a meal, maybe less. I don't really know. So yeah, you can do it all. You can have fancy and
You can do it
middle.
on a budget, mm-hmm, the middle of
Yeah,
the road, and absolutely cheap. Totally.
yeah.
I think you at a young age, like when did you move to Shanghai? When you were 26?
I think I would, yeah, 25, 26.
Yeah. I think you got spoiled at a very at a very young age. I don't think there's any turning back for you.
I've like ruined myself at this point. I'm constantly like, I don't know. There's no limits, and then I keep finding new friends who are like foodie friends who write for different, blogs or different like Shanghai city like kind of weekender, more
Mm-hmm.
formal kind of magazines or articles, and so they're like, oh, let's go here. Oh, this place just opened up. Let's try that. Um, So that's why I like to work out so much because I eat a lot.
Good for you. No, I think that's great. Those are the great kind. Those are like the best kind of friends to make, right? All the foodie ones.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about SCIS.
Okay.
SCIS is Shanghai Community International School, which is a school that we both worked at and that Meghan continues to work at. We both worked at the one campus. They have a few different campuses, and or a couple, two, three, four, three. Is Hangzhou still considered a campus or no?
They're separate.
Separate. Okay. Okay. So, so three different campuses. We worked on the one together, but then Meghan ended up moving to the one in Puxi, and she ended up moving to Puxi after her first year, which is more of like the city life, and we were more in the suburban life, if you could equate it to anything in the U.S. So, which you just can't, right? Like, I mean, I guess that is so interesting within itself. Like when we moved to Pudong, the one thing that I thought was just incredible that I had never seen in my life growing up, living in Philadelphia, growing up right outside of New York City, I had never seen so many high rises before in my life. Like in the suburban area, there would be like 36, 40, like 20, 30-story buildings all in like one complex together,
Yeah.
right? In the suburban area. And they'd be like identical. It'd be like a whole complex with like little waterfalls and walkways and paths and no? Yeah.
No, it's insane how many people live here. Like it's really hard to wrap your head around coming from any city in the States. I think people
Mm-hmm.
say like New York could probably be the most comparable, but like just the amount of people here, it's just wow.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I would say like it doesn't necessarily feel crowded. It doesn't feel like you're in a city of, it's not a crowded, would you say it's a crowded city? At least I
Well,
didn't have that.
if you got on the metro at rush hour and you tell me it's
Oh.
not, you know. There are times where you don't have to hold on to anything because you can't move anyways. Yeah.
That sounds very Japan too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's just, I don't know. It like kind of, you thrive on it if you enjoy it. And if you need
Mhm.
some, you seclude yourself in your apartment for a little while and recharge. And depending on your personality, then you go out and do it again.
I think that's the nice thing about Shanghai and being an expat in Shanghai is that you're able to go out and experience all that the city has to offer and be out there as much as you want. But then you can also kind of seclude yourself and be in your own little bubble of Western life as an
Yeah.
expat. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about SCIS. So what's the student population like and what's the teacher population like? You mentioned before, like your friends are very international, but what is that like and kind of what companies are also there still?
So our school is an international school and you need a foreign passport to go there. So they can't be local Chinese children. They have to have a foreign passport. Also, our campus, our Puxi campus, is so centrally located that a lot of families that are moved here, they don't want their child on the bus so long, so it makes it more. I don't know. They prefer our campus because it's just right in the heart of the city.
Mhm.
But I mean, I was trying to think. I think there's like 36 different countries or something more than that that are represented at our school. Um,
Mhm.
One thing that's so special, I think, to both staff and parents and children is our United Nations Day.
Mhm.
Every year we have this day called the United Nations Day of International Peace, UNIDOT. I don't know if I said that right.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and it's a special day where children get to dress in their local, not local, their home country. And then depending on like which campus or how old they are, they could bring in a dish to share, a snack to share. I know the main campus does something different than we do.
Mhm.
And it's just so fun to see such pride in everyone's country being represented. And then you can see like, that all the Swedish moms got together and found this one outfit to put all the Swedish kids in. So it's really great.
It was one of my favorite days working. I think it was my favorite day
Yeah.
working at SCIS is Unidot. Yeah, for sure.
The food that those moms and dads would make when we got to like just go through and eat. Oh my gosh, it was so good. So good.
I know, it's amazing, right? Because it's all homemade. It's not like coming from a restaurant. It's just genuine homemade food.
I can
Yeah.
remember how teachers, we would push at each other or we would be the first to get in line at the Indian table because those moms, that curry and I don't know what else they would make, but we were like fighting for it.
And they were so happy to give it to us too, right?
Right.
Yeah. And
Um,
so, like, do you know what companies are still there? Because I'm sure, since the time that I've left, it's kind of evolved a little bit.
I don't have like I have some specific names, but like
Mhm.
it's mainly like clothing and furniture manufacturing.
Mhm.
People like H&M and IKEA, a lot
Mhm.
in finance,
Mhm.
car manufacturing, and then we have some diplomats and shipping companies for like shipping
Mhm. Mhm.
uh, are mainly represented here. It's a question that I don't typically ask the parents. Like, I'm really curious about it, and I don't know why I don't ask it more often. But there's a whole lot of things that bring these families here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think nobody would be offended, if you were to ask a question like that. But I think you connect about so many other things that you don't always feel like you need to ask what people do for work. I mean, that's how I felt when I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I feel like in the US, sometimes it's like part of the conversation,
Yeah.
part
What
of
do
like
you
a
do?
standard conversation. What do you do for work? Right.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So let's talk COVID. So the beast of a conversation here. So, so you were visiting me in Hawaii at the start of your winter break, which was like mid-December, end of December, when COVID first broke out in China. I don't recall us even talking about it. I don't think it was much of a, even though it started, I don't think it was like making international news at that point.
No, I
Do
don't
you?
even think I knew about it until I came back right before Chinese New Year.
Okay. So you had already, you had spent your time with your family in Minnesota and then you ended up coming back to China. It was like not a big deal to go back to China after break then.
Nope.
Spring break. Winter break then.
Right.
So that, yeah.
So rare that I was in the States. It had been 5 years since I had gone back for Christmas. And yeah. Oh, I miss you. That was when like to see Hawaii, like that was so great. And then seeing family was great too. Yeah, and then when I came back here, we were just because there's typically like 3 weeks in between when we return from winter break and when Chinese New Year starts. It ranges. Sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 3. But the week before, we started hearing about something, and some companies were advising their workers not to travel to certain places. And for some reason, the flu like always wipes through our campus every year before Chinese New Year. It's just inevitable.
Mm.
And I remember that I think the day I left, it was January 24th. Either that day or the next day, they closed Wuhan. In China, Chinese New Year is the biggest, greatest migration. People are going to their hometowns to see family. And it was really affecting, I could see for my staff members, the local staff, there was talk that they might not get to see their family for this time. So that was hard.
How far away are their families? Like how far would they have to travel?
Most of them would go by train. I don't really know how long or far away it would be. I don't think any of them would fly. So trains are big. And if they have a car or know somebody with a car, they would drive. But it greatly affected the very beginning of Chinese New Year a lot.
So a lot of people just didn't travel at all.
Yeah.
But you hopped on a train and you hopped on a plane and went to Spain, right? Where you met up with your mom, right? And your aunt?
Mom, my cousin, and an aunt of mine.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, I made it. We're here. And I think 3 days into my trip, maybe 4, our head of school emailed out and was like, you're going to need to stay wherever you feel safe. We're not coming back to school. I guess I kind of blamed some of it out. I don't remember if there was anything specific, but most of us had only intended to leave or be gone for a week. So automatically I was like, oh my God, where am I going to go after this? What am I going to do? So while I'm being a tour guide for my family in Spain, I'm also having to think to the next week or, I didn't know how long.
Yeah. So then what happened? What did you do? So then your mom and your aunt and your cousin left.
Yeah.
What happened then?
My coworker, who was actually staying in China, she was just doing a staycation for Chinese New Year, was like, I need to get out. Just because people took it very seriously, thankfully. And people stayed inside. And they closed down so many things. She was just like, I think I just need to get out. Like, this is a lot. So she met up with me in Spain, and we spent, I think, like an extra 2 weeks there. And then I flew to Sweden because my Shanghai roommate is from Sweden, and he just so happened to be in Sweden. He had gone for like a later Christmas break. So I stayed with him for 10 days. And then, like, kind of in the middle of Sweden, I was just like, I have to go back to China. Like, I don't know how long this is going to last. It was really starting to hit the fan in so many other countries. And I just was so sick of living out of a suitcase and trying to do virtual learning. Like, it was a lot.
Right. So you were doing virtual learning while you were living abroad.
Yeah.
What was that like? And I mean, living abroad is like, living abroad from China, which sounds.
So I teach 3 and 4-year-olds preschool. And so mine looked a little different than other people's, but I had a really great teaching team this year. There were 5 of us. And so we rotated. One of us would make the activity for the day. So it'd be either a written post, there would be like something attached with it. So thankfully I only had to do 1 lesson a week that I had to think about. But I would always like record a little video. So it was kind of fun in the beginning because I was like all over Spain. So I was taking like these selfie videos. I'm like, hi, boys and girls. This is like the church, or like this is this beautiful park. And then after 3 weeks, oh God, I was struggling to like, there was no cool places. I'm like in somebody's basement right now. But the families really enjoyed it, and they sent me so many videos back because all of my students were stuck in all different places.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the one thing to connect us together, to try and stay connected. So we used the program Seesaw to do our virtual learning.
And so was everyone together through Seesaw?
Was it what?
Was everybody gathering together through Seesaw then?
Yeah, and like I would make a little recap video at the end of each week of like everybody's like action learning. Some of it had to do with lessons, some of it they were just dancing around their living room. But the parents said that that's what helped the children like remember their classmates and like kind of ignite some conversations where one little girl wanted to look at a map and she's like, where Australia? Like, why is, so-and-so in Australia? Where is that? I don't know. It seemed to be.
Yeah. So then you went back to Shanghai in, what was it? It was February, end of February then?
February. Yeah, I got back February 24th, and not many people were coming back at that point. And it was obviously different. Like, Jess, I was the only flight coming in at Pudong at that time. One flight.
What, in the day?
Yeah, or at that time, like we were the passengers in that airport.
Oh gosh, it's creepy, right?
For anybody that hasn't been to Pudong Airport, it is hopping most of the time. Like, so many people, so many flights coming in or taking off. Like, there's never only one baggage carousel like going around having luggage. The taxi drivers, they turn off their taxis because they said they waited for over an hour for just somebody to go through. But yeah, so sorry.
No, go ahead, Megan.
You had to register with your community liaison. I don't know. They're in charge of like just this little neighborhood area. My guard downstairs, he like took my temperature, and then he had this form that I was supposed to fill out, but it was all in Chinese. So he was trying to help me, and basically he was like, "You, Wuhan." I was like, "No," and he was like, "Okay," like no big deal. And then I didn't have many restrictions. Like I was self-quarantining to a certain extent because nothing was open, but like I could still go out for a walk every day. If I ordered any food or anything, it would just be delivered downstairs. It couldn't be brought to my door.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm so thankful I came back when I did. It was
And why? Because what would have happened if you didn't?
So the school, they started to hear that the borders were going to be closed. I think everybody was knowing that the borders were going to be closing eventually. And they started advising people to come back. And I think like 3 weeks after me, anybody who came back had to do home quarantine, like very strict home quarantine. And then like the last couple days, everybody was getting COVID tests when they flew in. Some people, depending on which country you came from, were put in government hotels. It was scary for those people coming in because the world is scared about it. And then you're also coming into a place where they seem to have most of it under control. And so they're just as nervous having other people return. Yeah, there was a lot. But they have this QR code here. It's through my one of my apps that I pay through. And there's green, yellow, and red. And you want green because it means you haven't had a temperature. You haven't been to a place that has this huge outbreak. And yeah, so it shows like it gives you the access to go into buildings, to go into restaurants, to enter your compound.
You would have to kind of show that wherever you went. And that was true for is that true for I mean, pretty much everyone has a smartphone in China, right? Or at least in Shanghai. So
to go in someplace, you needed it. And then they would always take your temperature, always. But everybody wore a mask. Most people are still wearing masks now. If you take any kind of public transportation, you have to wear one. But the QR code, it's starting to kind of go away because the borders have been closed for how long? But the masks are still a must. Some places still take your temperature, but we're all so used to it now. It's like, okay.
So do you know do you have any idea? Is there any talk about when the borders may open again?
People project, like some people were like, I think when it was May, they were like, oh, maybe August. Some people are like, oh, maybe December.
It's hard to really know.
Yeah.
Interesting. So when did it become scary for you? When was it ever? Was there like a scary moment for you?
There was one scary moment when I had been here for like a month, I think. And this number kept calling my phone, and I typically don't answer because I can't communicate anyways. But this number kept calling me, and I picked up, and it was such broken English. It was something like, do you need quarantine again? And I was like, no, I've been here. I haven't gone anywhere. And then they were like, we're coming tomorrow. And I'm like, why? And so I gave the phone number to my teaching assistant. And then she was messaging me, and she's like, it's your community member liaison. She's asking if you need to re-quarantine. And I was like, no, Miss April, I've been here. And then she was like, what's your passport number? Somehow they had my old passport number. I just wondered if it was written down wrong. So it probably looked like they didn't know where I came from.
Mm-hmm.
Got my correct one. She was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We know." But I was like, "Are they going to take me? Like, where would I go?" So that was the only time I was ever like scared about anything.
Mm-hmm. So then, okay, so virtual. So I was actually surprised to see that SCIS then ended up opening up their campus again.
Yeah.
So so I'm going to be returning back to work in less than 2 weeks now. So like in a week and a half, just, doing professional development, and then school will be open up for all the students in just under a month.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so I'm really interested to hear about how it felt to go back to work and kind of what it looked like for you.
So I was on the committee. We had to make a committee about return to campus. And we had to work, you had to get approval from the Shanghai Education Council. You could not do anything without their approval. And so then they created a huge, it seemed like a book of protocols and standards that you had to have in place in order for the school to be open. And the SCIS got to work. They basically tried to treat it kind of like a hospital. Like you could only go in one door and out a different door. You weren't supposed to cross paths with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
People have to show your QR codes when you enter. You need your temperature taken.
When you step onto campus.
The moment you cannot step onto campus
Mm-hmm.
unless you have a green QR code and no temperature.
Mm-hmm.
We had to create stations in like tents for a quarantine station if somebody had a high temperature. We had to create protocols if anyone had an elevated temperature. Who would you call? Where would they go? What are you doing with your class? Different cleaning procedures. Our IEs, who are, how do you describe them? Like kind of like janitors.
Mm-hmm.
We're cleaning shared spaces and like hallways constantly. Adults were required to wear masks, but the students, I think the older students had to, but we have 2 through 5-year-olds. And so it was based on what the parents wanted, but they had to wear a mask on buses. That was the requirement. And, thankfully we were on the committee because we really expressed how we wanted to make sure that it was emotionally appropriate for our age group. Even as adults, when you're seeing people in hazmat suits and people are shuffling you somewhere, it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And we really wanted to make sure that everything was like as positive as possible for these little ones. I think we did a good job.
Mm-hmm. So who was in hazmat suits and why, like where did you see them?
So when the main campus opened, when they wanted to do these promotional videos, I think at the time, the nurse that was in the quarantine tent had to be in a hazmat suit. Somehow that like changed because we were trying to think too of like, if a kid has an elevated temperature, we're not going to tell them we're taking you to the quarantine tent. What does that mean to them? Man, I can't remember like what we called it, but it was like the bear box or the better box.
Right.
Trying to
make it age appropriate, not scary. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then we took pictures of all of the teachers with masks on and then without masks so that, you could show it to your students before they came to campus.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing that I struggled with, and we don't know if the rules will change, but nobody but teachers and staff and students are allowed on campus. No parents, no grandparents, no deliveries. Like, it was very strict. So also,
so why was that such a big? I mean, so I mean, I kind of get a sense of why that would be a struggle, but can you kind of tell a little bit why that would be like such a huge change and why that would be a struggle?
Well, obviously they were doing it because they wanted the least contamination as possible from like any
Mm-hmm.
outsider. But for our little kids, a lot of times they're coming to school with their mom or dad or IE, and
Mm-hmm.
they also hadn't been in school for 16 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to take them away from parents at the gate. We were anticipating probably the worst, like thinking like kids are crying and screaming. We only had one or two, thankfully, and then the
Mm-hmm.
classroom, they were okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then, like the same at the end of the day, you're having to bring the kid out. They need a certain card in order to receive the child, and then like with the added mask, I'm used to seeing certain eyes, and that's like throwing a whole different ballgame where you're really making sure that you're giving that child to the right person. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I'm so scared for the beginning of next year because we have brand new students who some of them have never been
Mm-hmm.
to school before, and we used to have this thing where the parents would come in and spend like the first 30 minutes with us and just really create like a calm and like, I don't know, inviting atmosphere.
Environment, yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
so far we're told there's no changes to anything. So we'll see. But I
And
think it's early.
when do you start up school again?
I don't know. They, at the end of the school year, they said something about September 1st, but it wasn't stated if it was going to be just teachers, if that's students as well. Um, yeah, we don't really have any information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the concerns that I have about going back is that there will be new students, and I will be new to a whole bunch of students, even if they are familiar with our campus. And I just feel like as a dean and counselor, like I just feel like facial expression is so important, and like for kids to feel welcomed and to feel reassured by like the adults who are caring for them and showing the expressions for concern and care or just smiling and happy and anyway, we do have the option to wear the shield.
Oh, yeah.
And so as much as that's not going to really do with my hair, I feel like I'm going to have to put that aside to make sure like my kids can see my face and get to know, like, just to make that connection too. I mean, it's like so many elements of why I feel like my
Right.
hair will have to be put second.
I mean, that sounds better than having to wear a mask when you're sweaty and you're trying to talk to people and no one can hear you or understand you. I think the shield might be a better option.
Mm, Well,
You're so right about being mindful of making people feel welcomed and comfortable because your face really says a lot, especially to kids and to new people.
Okay, so let's put COVID aside. I mean, it's so relevant, but it's a beast. Okay, so you have been a single lady the whole time you've been in Shanghai. Um, I think you've certainly gone through like an evolution of being single and what that looks like for you. Tell us about what the dating scene is like in Shanghai, and maybe not just even just your experience, but even some of the experience of like some of your friends.
Sure. So I think the amount of people here, it's overwhelming. It's you tend to think that your options are way better because you're in a city of so many millions of people. However, most foreign men that come here typically come here for Asian women. Um, it's just how it works. So it's already your pool is a little limited.
Mhm.
but there's apps like Tinder and Bumble and OkCupid. And then it's so international. Like you're like swiping on like Italians and Swedes, and it's like, wow, you do not get this in Minnesota. And so you need to be open-minded. I think going on dates, you realize that you really do need to have a common language, and it has to be a little bit more than hi, how are you? Yeah, that doesn't always go so well.
It sounds like you've been through that a few times.
Like, oh, this is going to be, thank God we're just having drinks right now, or this is going to be weird. I also have had girlfriends who they've gone on like meetup groups where they'll do like hiking or going to like a nearby town, or it's like bowling or some kind of activity. I tend to think that they have better results that way because you have like a shared interest. It's kind of less maybe intimidating than just being on a date. And yeah, then you have nightclubs. Clubs, man, that's where a lot of, I mean, most of the time, like the girls will go to like let your hair down and like you're dancing, and then that's where you meet all types of men. But yeah, I mean, the possibilities are endless. You can be actively seeking it. You can be completely closed off to it.
Something in between.
Yeah.
Okay, so with living abroad or traveling, have you ever had a like, what have I just done moment?
In regards to dating or just like regular life?
I think that's you know what? I think that's a two-part question.
Let's see. I remember writing this down. Oh yeah. I've never had like, what have I just done? I think the shocking thing for me is when our contracts come out every year. So initially you sign for a 2-year contract. And then after that, it's a 1-year extension. And this last one, when I thought about how long I was here, I immediately thought of one of our coworkers that I met when I first moved here. And when he said he had been here for 8 years, 9 years, I'm like, good Lord, like, what are you doing here? I think it's more like, what have I done? I'm like, I can't believe this amount of time has gone past. I'm shocked that I'm still here. I'm still loving it. Yeah, that's probably the more like, wow.
Yeah. Do you have any plans? Any like thoughts for your future? What are you thinking?
So I was thinking about moving on. I think with the COVID situation, I can't imagine that many schools will be hiring in like the next year or two. And I think the world probably needs a chance to calm down and reset, which would then put me at like being in Shanghai for like 10 years. I want to continue being international. I don't want to go teach back in the States. So, I mean, the same like when you're moving abroad initially, I don't want to be like, closed off to anything because maybe it could be something great. But obviously Europe sounds so appealing. But then again, I've never been to South America. That could be cool.
So really, you're like totally open.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. The world is my oyster. I hope that I continue to be so blessed with finding a place like this, and hopefully my next place can be just as great. So,
I mean, I think, we've stayed in touch with a lot of the people that we've become friends with since we've moved, since we first moved to Shanghai. I think some have had really wonderful experiences, and some maybe didn't have as good experiences since leaving Shanghai. Like, does that occur to you at all, or like, do you think about those sorts of things? Like, What do
Yeah.
you take into consideration there?
By the way, our first year in Shanghai was my favorite year teaching
Oh,
our group.
that makes me like really happy to hear you say that, by the way. What?
Well, our group was so close and like we had so much fun together.
Mhm.
And like I really was kind of like, in a little like the little sister of like everyone else had done this before. Everyone else had been somewhere. So I'm learning from what they're telling me in their example. And
Mhm.
then freaking a year later, half of them leave. 2 years, everyone's almost out.
Mhm.
And yet we still remain connected. And so many of them are like, don't leave Shanghai, stay put. Which was like, okay, no problem.
Right.
And it's not to say that, our friends aren't enjoying themselves. Like some of them have started families, in particular,
Mhm.
and had like wonderful things happen. But I think our connection that first year was just, oh, it was so wonderful.
Yeah, it was special, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting because I just has always assumed that that's just how it is internationally, that everybody has like a really special year. Sorry. Um, that everybody that's just how it would be anywhere that you land in your first year. But I, it doesn't seem to be that way as time has gone, as talking with everybody, keeping in touch with everybody as time goes on, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
for us, we're like, this is how it should be. Like, this is great. This is,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to someone who's been offered an opportunity to live internationally?
Number one, take it. Take it. Go. Um, I wrote this down too so that I didn't say anything.
You didn't need to take notes.
No, because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget things. Um, I think, so many of our friends and family, I'm sure yours had said it too, like, we live vicariously through you.
Mm.
And I'm like, why don't you travel more? Like, why don't you just do it yourself? I'm happy to provide such Instagram stories of my travels.
Mhm.
But there's something about traveling that gives you such a sense of the world and a sense of yourself.
Mhm.
You 100% will find yourself or who you are when you leave your comfort zone.
Mhm.
Um, Researching your country is really important. Knowing what you're getting into. I think about for us, like I didn't think so much to research like a whole lot, but one of the things that I love about this city is how safe it is here.
Mhm.
I
But I
came,
mean, how could you have researched that? Like that would have been really difficult to like, research on the internet. You would have really had to just kind of talk to somebody
yeah.
who lived here, right?
Yeah, but I think about like, it's general knowledge, like when you go to Central America or South America, like
Mhm. Mhm.
how you hold your purse, where you are at certain hours. Don't,
Mhm.
and here I'm so lucky. We live in such a safe place here.
Right, absolutely. I never felt scared. I never once felt scared walking alone at night or um I mean, and I would do that, or even just walking with you, or I don't like what didn't even occur to me that something bad could happen, and it never did, and like we never heard of it.
Right. No.
Yeah, I think probably the worst thing that I had heard is just the scams that would happen,
Yeah.
where people like tourists would get scammed. I think that's probably like one of the worst things that I ever heard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, being mindful of that.
Hmm.
And the last thing is just embrace being uncomfortable. Like, that's where you learn and grow, and you find out that there are some things you like, and you never would have known that you liked it. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Do
I'm
you have
all
an
for,
example? Do you have an example of that? Like, is there something that kind of sticks out to you in terms of like what made you feel uncomfortable, and then you were like, oh, I love this, or this
Uh,
is me, or you know?
I mean, kind of. I think there's two. Like one of them is I'm such an extrovert. I literally have not one introverted quality about myself. And in Shanghai, you can be as busy as you want to be. There's always something going on, and there's always friends that want to hang out. So you can be just as busy. But the one thing, and I was frustrated with myself, is that when people would try to communicate with me, I would just be like, I Timpudong, I don't understand. And thanks to, well, not thanks to COVID, but because of COVID, I just started taking a Chinese class. 6 years
Very
later.
good, Megan. I'm really proud of you. Yeah.
But so I don't know how many people try to learn a new language after 30. I don't know how successful they are, but I'm trying. It's definitely going to need a whole lot of practice. But when I was like most uncomfortable or like annoyed, it was with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no excuses. Like I've lived here for so long. Where else am I going to learn Chinese? I need it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Good for you. I'm very proud of you.
thanks. I'll let you know how it goes. We'll see if I can put together sentences.
Well, I felt like I was learning a lot of Chinese from you, just because you were learning like just little phrases that were very practical and like very basic, you know, because you're working with 3 and 4 and 5 year olds, 3 and 4 year olds.
Yeah.
And I guess let's talk about that real quick before we kind of move on to the next thing. You know, one of the things you said is that Chinese nationals can't go to the school, but they do. What's the workaround there?
So they will go to different countries where they can have a baby, and then that baby has a foreign passport. I don't know if I should like name drop those countries.
No.
Okay.
No, we don't need to get specific,
but so then because of that foreign passport, that child has so many more opportunities than they would have had by having a local passport. And so with that foreign passport, they, immediately return here and they don't speak English. And so I'm working with little 3 and 4 year olds who only speak Chinese, and it's frustrating for both of us. We're both frustrated with each other. So here's this Lao Ai Lao Shi, this foreign teacher coming at me again. Like, and I'm like, all I'm asking you is to sit down or wear your shoes. And so because little children are so repetitive in any language, that's how they learn. It was easy for me to pick it up of like and like short little phrases, but it's not functional when you're trying to talk to an adult outside of school.
Some of them like stop and, anyway, I felt like I learned from you. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I think a nice way for us to kind of close out is just to ask you some questions. Just whatever comes to the top of your head, just feel free to share. Okay. So, and these are supposed to be like kind of happy, feel good things. Okay. Especially during this COVID time. Okay. So your favorite vacation?
Ooh, that's, girl, I've been on quite a few.
I know.
The
first one.
I thought being in Oman was incredibly amazing. But being in Bhutan was probably up there as one of my favorite places.
Worst moment of travel?
Worst moment of travel? Oh my God. When I was on my first winter break, I was in Bali, and the people that I was with wanted to just live for the moment each day and go find our next accommodation the day of. And we couldn't find accommodations. It was hot. A little fun fact about myself is I don't like to be hot. So
You're a sweater.
very irritable.
Oh gosh, wait, let's pause for a second. Do you remember when it was like before school started, or maybe it was like our first weekend, and we were just kind of exploring. We were with like our brand new cohort, and one of the guys who was part of our group turned to you and was like, what did he say to you?
Well, he was like, oh, he's like, you're sweating like profusely. And I was like, yeah, it's hot. When it's probably like 80%, 90% humidity, it feels
And
like
90 degrees, 95 degrees. Yeah.
But then what really got me was we parted ways at like the vegetable or fruit market. And then we came back and he saw me and he's like, you're still sweating. And I'm like, you're still an asshole. Like, what?
Okay. Favorite Chinese food? Like favorite dish?
But I love like those things that you mentioned before of like a jianbing, like the breakfast burritos. Those are delicious. But I also really love like dumplings, like baozi and like xiaolongbao. And oh my gosh, but noodles. You can't make me choose, Jess.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll move on to the next one. Worst food you'd experience in Shanghai. Or China. Or in your travels.
I'm trying to think of. I mean, I think sometimes like some of the fish can be a little too fishy. Where I know it's like not something for me. The smell of durian will always be upsetting. Like there's, oh my God, and stinky tofu. Nope.
All right. Favorite airline?
I've had wonderful experiences on Korean Air. I think they can pamper you really well.
Mm-hmm. And favorite airport?
Oh, might have to be Korea. Oh, no. Singapore airport. Oh my God. Because that's obviously a place that you would frequent a lot as a child, but to have a movie theater, a butterfly garden, and endless other things.
Oh, but I don't think they had all those things when I was a child. So yeah. Yeah. Meghan, thank you so much for coming and talking about Shanghai and just all that you've been through in the past 6 years. And I'm so excited for you to continue your journey on and would love to stay in touch. So anyway, I hope to visit you one day too soon again.
Right. I would love to have a Shanghai reunion in Shanghai.
Oh, that would be the best.
Right. And thank you for listening to everything that I had to say.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. Okay. Thank you, Meghan.